The snow stretched to the horizon, an endless desert of white broken only by shattered trees and the skeletal remains of a ruined comms tower. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, yet the stillness was deceptive. Beneath the wind's low moan, faint distortions shimmered, ripples of light bending around unseen figures. The Xy'kath warriors advanced through the storm, their refractive armor rendering them invisible to drones and satellites. 6 of them, elite soldiers bred for conquest, stepped in perfect rhythm. Their mission was precise: locate and eliminate the human sniper whose signal had cut off an entire invasion unit the night before. Their commander, Karnthal, moved at the center of the formation, his tall frame outlined briefly by the snow swirling against his cloak. He despised this planet, its cold, its silence, its fragile creatures who refused to die quietly. He raised a hand, and the squad froze. Through the distortion of his visor, the landscape flickered with thermal interference. "The human is here," he growled in his native tongue, a language that rasped like ice grinding against stone. "Do not underestimate this one. He sees more than your scanners." His subordinates exchanged uneasy glances, though none dared speak. Pride kept their fear contained, as did the certainty of their technology. They had faced humans before and crushed them. One sniper, no matter how skilled, was still flesh against phase-shielded armor. High above them, on a jagged ridge, Elias Ward watched through his scope. He had been waiting for hours, motionless beneath a thin layer of frost. The ghillie suit he wore was coated in powdered snow, merging seamlessly with the terrain. His rifle, a rail-calibrated sniper system designed to punch through composite armor, rested against his shoulder with the familiarity of an old companion. Through the optic's polarized lens, the faint distortions below glimmered like ghosts. They thought they were unseen, but to Elias, they were as clear as footprints in fresh snow. He tracked their spacing, movement rhythm, the subtle shifts in air pressure where their cloaks displaced wind. Years of hunting, training, and surviving had taught him to read what machines could not. His breath fogged the inside of his visor. He suppressed the instinct to wipe it away. Motion was death. He focused instead on the nearest distortion, taller than the others, walking with the confident stride of command. He knew their leader would be patient, methodical. That made him dangerous. The others would follow orders. That made them predictable. Elias smiled faintly. Predictability was a weakness. The snow gusted harder, wind howling across the valley. The aliens slowed, scanning with their multi-spectrum visors. One of them lifted a small drone from its wrist and released it into the air. Elias tracked it, adjusting his rifle's rangefinder. The drone emitted a faint pulse, invisible to most sensors but bright as a beacon on his electromagnetic overlay. He waited until it reached 30 meters overhead, then squeezed the trigger. The rifle thundered once, a sonic crack echoing through the mountains. The drone shattered in midair, fragments scattering like sparks before vanishing into the snow. The squad reacted instantly, cloaks flaring as they dove for cover. Karnthal hissed a command, scanning the ridge. Left flank, return fire. Plasma bolts streaked upward, glowing blue through the storm. Each missed by meters, melting holes into the ice. Elias remained calm. The sound of their weapons was distant, almost dreamlike. He had already relocated, sliding downhill through a narrow trench. He moved like the wind, quiet, deliberate, unseen. When he settled into his new position, his heart had not quickened once. He lifted his rifle again and lined up the shot. One of the Xy'kath had broken formation to inspect the wreckage of the drone. Arrogance, or perhaps curiosity. Elias exhaled slowly. "Don't move," he whispered, though the alien could never hear him. He fired. The rail slug tore through the distortion, and the air exploded with a shimmer of refracted light. The alien collapsed, cloak flickering out to reveal an angular body armored in dull silver plates. Panic spread among the remaining 5. Their formation crumbled. Elias could hear their guttural speech through his comm's passive channel. fear bleeding into the edges of command. He shifted again, crawling along the ridge's edge, calculating distances. He remembered the first time he'd seen these creatures, when their dropships fell from the sky over Moscow, blotting out the clouds. His entire unit had been wiped out in the first wave. The memory still burned behind his eyes, a constant ember. He had sworn then that if he survived, he'd make sure the invaders remembered Earth not as a conquest, but as a graveyard. Another movement below. Two of the Xy'kath dragged their fallen comrade's body toward cover. Elias let them, marking their position in his HUD. Patience was the difference between vengeance and survival. He adjusted the rifle scope, waiting until the leader, Karnthal, by the way he barked orders, stepped into view again. Even cloaked, the heat bloom of his weapon registered faintly through the snow. Elias's finger hovered over the trigger. Then something unexpected happened. The aliens stopped moving. Karnthal tilted his head upward, directly toward the ridge. Through his scope, Elias saw the faintest glint of reflected light off the commander's visor. For the briefest moment, their gazes met across 600 meters of frozen air. A flicker of recognition passed between them, wordless and primal, the acknowledgement of predators. Karnthal raised his weapon. Elias fired first. The rail slug screamed through the air, but the alien commander moved with inhuman speed. The shot grazed his shoulder, sending him stumbling but alive. A blast of plasma followed, striking the ridge inches from Elias's position. The explosion shook the ground, sending snow and rock cascading around him. He rolled backward, narrowly avoiding the debris. For the first time, his heart raced. They'd found his nest. He retreated deeper into the slope, moving between frozen boulders. His suit's camouflage flickered, recalibrating. He crouched behind an outcrop, breathing hard, every muscle tense. Above the roar of the wind, he heard Karnthal's voice echo through the valley. "You hide well, human." It boomed, distorted but clear. But the snow remembers every step. Elias reloaded, steadying his rifle. His lips curved into a thin, grim smile. "Then let it remember yours," he whispered. Through his scope, he watched the distortions closing in, circling like wolves. He waited until the nearest shimmer passed within range, finger tightening on the trigger. The storm screamed overhead, drowning all sound but the thump of his pulse. The hunt had truly begun. The storm worsened overnight, wind carving sharp ridges into the frozen valley. Elias woke before dawn, though he had not truly slept. His visor displayed only static. The blizzard was scattering the drone signals he'd set for early warning. Good. That meant the Xy'kath couldn't see either. He took a slow breath, watching the condensation fade against the inside of his mask. 3 kills. 3 still breathing. They'd regroup, adapt, and come for him again. They always did. He rechecked the rifle's magnetic coil, brushing away frost from the barrel with mechanical care. The routine steadied him, something simple in a world that had lost all sense of order. When the weapon hummed softly, alive again, he whispered, "One more day." Below, through layers of wind and snow, Karnthal crouched beside the body of one of his fallen. The corpse steamed faintly, heat leaking through fractured armor. He pressed a clawed hand to the wound, then withdrew it, the blood freezing almost instantly. Around him, the remaining warriors watched in silence, their cloaks flickering with residual distortion. "He hunts us," Karnthal growled. "He reads the cold like a book." The others shifted uneasily. One muttered something about phase instability and human tricks. Karnthal ignored him. Pride burned in his chest, but beneath it was something unfamiliar, a trace of fear. He had fought plasma storms, parasites, and the void itself, but this single human on a dead world had already rewritten everything he knew about war. "We adapt," he ordered, forcing conviction into the words. "He bleeds like we do." Elias scanned from the ridge, noting their formation changes. They were faster now, moving in tighter clusters, scanning every rock and drift. They'd learned caution. Good. Fear was a weapon, and he knew how to use it. He shifted to a new position 200 meters east, dragging his gear through the snow to mask his previous nest. Every sound mattered. The crunch of ice, the scrape of metal. His heart thrummed in his ears, but his movements were exact, rehearsed, patient. He had lived long enough in this wasteland to understand that survival wasn't about strength. It was about rhythm. Move when the wind moves. Fire when the silence ends. He reached a shallow hollow beneath a fallen pine. Through his scope, faint distortions shimmered again. 3 shapes advancing while a 4th hung back. The commander, perhaps. Elias didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, he activated a beacon half buried in the snow 50 meters away. A decoy pulse flickered, mimicking a weapon's electromagnetic signature. The aliens turned sharply, drawn toward it like sharks to blood. The trap was set. When the first one approached the beacon, Elias detonated the charge. A flash of blue light tore through the storm, scattering shards of armor across the ice. One warrior fell instantly, body convulsing before the cloak collapsed entirely. The others screamed in their own distorted frequency, the sound sharp enough to make Elias's helmet sensor spike. He rolled to a new angle and fired twice, once through the chest of a second target, once through the leg of another. Snow exploded in a plume of vapor. The air filled with static and fury. Karnthal dove behind a ridge, his own cloak sputtering. "Fall back," he commanded, voice heavy with rage. He anticipates every move. His mind raced, analyzing. The human had lured them, understood their reaction times, exploited their reliance on scanners. He was fighting like no soldier Karnthal had faced, more predator than man. The commander pressed a hand to the snow, activating his last resort, a pulse emitter designed to disrupt low-frequency optics. The surrounding white glowed faintly violet. "Let us see him bleed," he snarled. Elias's visor flared as the pulse hit, washing his vision in static. He cursed softly, ripping off the digital overlay and switching to analog scope mode. The world became raw again, stripped of numbers and data. Just his eyes in the storm. He adjusted focus manually, finding movement through instinct rather than sensors. A ripple of snow at the base of a tree. A reflection, too sharp to be ice. He fired once, then again. A cry followed, cut short. The emitter flickered and died. The storm reclaimed its silence. He breathed hard, adrenaline finally burning through his calm exterior. His knuckles ached where he gripped the rifle. For a moment, he imagined his old squad. The laughter in the barracks, the sound of human voices that weren't drowned in static or gunfire. They died on the second day of the invasion. He hadn't said a word as they fell, just kept shooting. He still didn't know if that made him brave or broken. Movement returned at the edge of his vision. One distortion, larger, steadier, approached low and fast. Karnthal himself, weapon drawn, plasma core flickering. Elias didn't move. The alien's cloak sputtered, briefly revealing glinting armor and 4 luminous eyes. They locked onto each other for a fraction of a second, hunter to hunter. Karnthal raised his weapon, and Elias dove sideways, rolling through the snow as a beam scorched the ground where he'd been. He came up on one knee, rifle steady, and fired through the blur. The round struck the alien's shoulder, spinning him backward. But before Elias could finish it, the commander vanished again, dissolving into the storm. He waited, breathing shallowly. The landscape seemed empty once more, except for the faint hum of cooling metal and the hiss of wind. The battle had lasted less than 2 minutes, but the valley now lay littered with wreckage, fragments of armor half buried in the drifts. Elias checked his ammunition. 3 rounds left in the primary magazine. Enough. He retrieved one of the alien corpses, dragging it beside a rock outcrop for cover. Up close, the creature looked both fragile and terrifying, its translucent skin webbed with bioluminescent veins. He stared for a moment, not in hatred, but in quiet understanding. Whatever they were, they had believed they couldn't lose. That belief had died here. Night began to fall again, darkness seeping through the clouds like ink. Elias sealed the beacon logs and sent a burst transmission on a dead frequency. Maybe command would hear. Maybe no one would. It didn't matter. Above, Faint lights pulsed through the sky, dropships preparing for another descent. The next wave. He reloaded slowly, eyes never leaving the horizon. Somewhere out there, the commander would be waiting, wounded but alive. Elias smiled, faintly behind the frost of his visor. "Round 2, he whispered. Then he lay flat once more, body vanishing into the snow as the storm rose to cover all trace of life. The world had turned to silence again by dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline wasteland that glittered faintly under a pale, indifferent sun. Elias crouched at the ridge's edge, scanning the horizon. The alien bodies he had left the night before were gone, dragged away in the night. Only grooves in the snow remained, long trails that led east toward the valley floor. They were regrouping again. He knew what that meant. Karnthal wasn't finished. Wounded, humiliated, desperate perhaps, but not defeated. That kind of pride didn't die quietly. Elias exhaled, his breath forming a thin mist that drifted away like smoke. "Come find me, then," he murmured. Down below, Karnthal leaned against a shattered rock, his right arm bound in a tourniquet of metallic thread. Pain flared every time he moved, but he refused to acknowledge it. Around him, only one warrior remained, a younger fighter with a cloak barely functioning. The others were dead, their remains vaporized or scattered across the tundra. He had underestimated the human. It wasn't weakness that kept them alive. It was defiance, a kind of madness he couldn't understand. "We end this," he rasped. The warrior hesitated, uncertain. Karnthal's eyes glowed brighter. "He will not leave this world alive." Elias moved through the snow with practiced stillness, each step deliberate. The cold gnawed at his joints, the air so dry it burned his throat. His suit's heating core had begun to falter, but he ignored the warning indicators blinking across his visor. Pain reminded him he was still alive. His HUD flickered, catching faint traces of heat near the valley floor. They were coming. He adjusted his rifle, double-checked the rail alignment, and positioned himself behind a half-frozen ridge that overlooked the only path left through the terrain. If Karnthal wanted to end this, he'd have to walk into Elias's world, one built of ice, distance, and patience. The first sign came as a shimmer along the ridgeline, faint distortions bending the sunlight. He could almost admire the precision of it, how their technology fought against nature's simplicity. He whispered under his breath, "Visibility's your curse." Then he waited. The alien pair advanced, scanning slowly, every movement deliberate. Elias counted the rhythm between their steps. 6 seconds, pause, scan, 6 seconds again. Karnthal was slower now, wounded but steady. The younger warrior ranged ahead, cloak flickering under the stress of cold interference. Elias tracked him through the scope, aligned the crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger. The railgun cracked like thunder. The front runner vanished in a burst of blue mist, body disintegrating before it hit the ground. Karnthal froze, eyes narrowing beneath his mask. He dropped to one knee, scanning wildly. "Show yourself, coward!" The shout echoed across the valley, distorted by the cold air. Elias didn't move. He watched through the scope as Karnthal ripped off the failing cloak and stood exposed, armor glinting in the light. It was a challenge, raw and deliberate. Elias's finger hesitated on the trigger. He could end it now, one perfect shot to the skull. But something in the commander's stance stopped him. It wasn't surrender. It was resolve, the same kind that had driven him to keep fighting long after reason said stop. Elias lowered the rifle slightly, repositioning for a cleaner angle. Karnthal began to advance uphill, weapon drawn, each step sending small avalanches tumbling down. He felt his heart quicken, the rhythm measured and precise. When Karnthal reached the halfway point, Elias fired again. The shot clipped the alien's shoulder, spinning him sideways, but he didn't fall. He roared and fired back, a blast of plasma scorching the rocks inches from Elias's face. Heat seared through his visor, and he rolled, shifting to a new position behind an outcrop. The alien's approach was relentless now, every step a declaration. "Come on," Elias muttered, voice low. "Show me what you've got." Karnthal reached the top of the rise, breathing hard. His armor was cracked, one lens shattered, steam rising from the wound in his chest. He spotted the glint of metal half buried ahead and fired instinctively. The shot tore through snow and silence, but hit nothing. Elias was already behind him, moving like shadow, rifle in hand but no longer raised. The distance between them closed with agonizing slowness. Carnthal turned, raising his weapon, but Elias was faster. The butt of the rifle struck the alien's jaw, sending him sprawling. The plasma gun fell into the snow, hissing faintly as it cooled. They faced each other in the storm's aftermath, two remnants of dying wars, neither willing to yield. Carnthal lunged with a blade drawn from his armor, its edge glowing faintly blue. Elias sidestepped, the motion instinctive, and drove a knife upward beneath the alien's ribs. The creature staggered, claws scrabbling for balance. "You can't kill what's already broken," Elias said quietly. He twisted the blade once, cleanly, and stepped back. Carnthal collapsed into the snow, his cloak flickering one last time before dying completely. For a long moment, Elias just stood there, chest heaving, eyes unfocused. The wind swept across the valley, whispering through shattered metal and fractured armor. Slowly, he knelt beside the alien and removed his helmet. Beneath it, the creature's features were strangely human, angular, weary, eyes burning with something close to understanding. Elias closed them gently before rising again. Above, the sound of engines rumbled faintly through the sky. Dropships, heavy and distant. Reinforcements or scavengers, he couldn't tell. It didn't matter anymore. The mission was done. The relay would stay down. He slung his rifle across his back and turned toward the ridge, his silhouette merging with the endless white. Every movement hurt now. The cold had settled into his bones, but he welcomed it. Pain meant purpose. He reached the crest and looked back once more. The battlefield was nothing but silence and snow, the traces of war already fading. The wind would erase everything soon, footprints, blood, even the dead. Only the memory would remain, if anyone lived to remember it. Elias adjusted the comm on his wrist and recorded a final log, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. Target neutralized. Mission complete. If anyone hears this, Earth still stands. He shut the transmitter off and let the silence reclaim him. The sky burned faintly orange as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It painted the snow with light that felt almost warm. Elias smiled beneath his frostbitten mask, then began walking toward the horizon, leaving no trace but the whisper of boots against ice. Somewhere behind him, the storm began to rise again, swallowing the valley whole.